The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, its edges damp from the storm. My hands trembled as I opened it, recognizing my mother's elegant handwriting. She had passed away 3 months ago, leaving behind a life shrouded in mystery. The letter was brief but cryptic. My wealth is not what it seems. The truth lies in the attic. Be careful who you trust. Please subscribe to my channel for more sweet videos like this. Let the story continue. I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, my heart pounding. Dust-covered boxes and old furniture filled the space, but one item stood out. A small, ornate chest with a lock shaped like a crescent moon. My mother had always worn a necklace with the same symbol. As I reached for the chest, a chill ran down my spine. What secrets had she hidden from me all these years? The chest was locked, and no amount of tugging could open it. Frustrated, I searched the attic for a key, my mind racing with possibilities. My mother's words echoed in my head. Be careful who you trust. Did she mean someone close to me? My thoughts turned to my uncle, her younger brother, who had always been overly interested in her finances. As I rummaged through an old jewelry box, I found a small key with a crescent moon design. It fits perfectly into the lock. Inside the chest was a stack of documents, a faded photograph, and a strange, ancient-looking coin. The photograph showed my mother standing with a group of people I didn't recognize, in front of a grand, unfamiliar building. The coin had intricate engravings and symbols I couldn't decipher. What did it all mean? Beneath the photograph and coin, I found another letter, this one even more cryptic than the first. If you're reading this, you've found the key to my legacy. But know this, my wealth is not money. It's knowledge, and it's dangerous. My mother's words sent a shiver down my spine. What kind of knowledge could be so dangerous? The letter mentioned a place called the Obsidian Society and warned me to avoid them at all costs. I had never heard of such a group, but the name alone sounded ominous. The letter ended with a clue. Start with the coin. It holds the first answer. I turned the coin over in my hands, studying its markings. Was it a map? A code? The mystery was deepening, and I knew I was only scratching the surface. I spent hours researching the Obsidian Society, but information was scarce. The few references I found were in old, obscure books and conspiracy forums. They were described as a secretive organization that had existed for centuries, rumored to possess forbidden knowledge and immense power. My mother's warning made sense now. If they were real, they were dangerous. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. A deep, unfamiliar voice said, "You have something that belongs to us. Return it, or face the consequences." The line went dead before I could respond. My heart raced. How did they know about the coin? And what else did they want? I realized I was no longer just uncovering my mother's secrets. I was in danger. The coin's engravings seemed to form a pattern, almost like a map. I compared it to an old atlas and found a match, a small, remote island in the Mediterranean. My mother had traveled there years ago, but she had never mentioned why. Was this the first clue to her legacy? I booked a flight, my mind swirling with questions. What would I find on the island? And why had my mother hidden this from me? As I packed my bags, I noticed a shadowy figure watching my house from across the street. The Obsidian Society was already closing in. I had to move quickly. The flight to the Mediterranean was uneventful, but my nerves were on edge. The island was small and barely marked on modern maps, its name unfamiliar, Erythra. As the plane descended, I could see lush greenery and rocky cliffs, with a single village nestled near the coast. The coin's engravings seemed to point to a specific location inland, deep within the island's forest. I checked it to a small inn, where the owner eyed me suspiciously. When I mentioned the coin, his face paled. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered in broken English. "That coin brings trouble." Before I could ask more, he hurried away. The island's secrets were clearly guarded, and I was an outsider. But I couldn't turn back now. The next morning, I ventured into the forest, following the map on the coin. The air was thick with the scent of pine, and the only sound was the rustling of leaves. As I walked deeper, I noticed strange symbols carved into the trees, similar to the ones on the coin. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Start with the coin. It holds the first answer. After hours of hiking, I reached a clearing with a massive stone archway covered in moss and vines. In the center was a pedestal with a crescent-shaped indentation, the same shape as the coin. My heart raced as I placed the coin into the slot. The ground trembled, and the archway began to glow. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dark passageway. What lay beyond? The passageway led to a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings and glowing crystals. In the center was a pedestal holding a book bound in black leather. The title was etched in gold, the Codex of Erythra. My mother's letter had mentioned knowledge, not wealth. Was this the legacy she had left behind? As I opened the book, a voice echoed through the chamber. "You are not alone." I spun around, but no one was there. The voice continued. "The Codex holds the power of the ancients, but it comes at a price. Are you prepared to pay it?" Before I could respond, the ground shook again, and the door began to close. I grabbed the book and ran, barely escaping as the chamber sealed behind me. Back at the inn, I studied the Codex, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams. It seemed to be a guide to some kind of ancient technology or power, but I couldn't decipher it. That night, as I sat by the window, I noticed a figure watching me from the shadows. It was the same man who had been outside my house. I confronted him, demanding to know who he was. He stepped into the light, revealing a sharp face and piercing blue eyes. "My name is Elias," he said. "I was your mother's protector, and now I'm here to protect you." His words stunned me. My mother had a protector? What had she been involved in? Elias explained that my mother had been a member of the Obsidian Society, but she had betrayed them to protect the Codex. She knew they would use its power for destruction, he said. "She hid it here, hoping you would find it when the time was right." I was overwhelmed. My mother, a member of a secret society? It didn't seem possible. But the evidence was in my hands, the Codex, the coin, the chamber. Elias warned me that the society would stop at nothing to reclaim the book. "You're in danger," he said, "but you're also the only one who can stop them." As I processed his words, I realized my life would never be the same. My mother's legacy wasn't just a secret, it was a responsibility. Elias and I spent the next few days deciphering the Codex. The symbols were a mix of ancient languages and mathematical equations. But one page stood out, a diagram of a device called the Eternum Core. According to the text, it was a source of infinite energy, capable of powering entire civilizations or destroying them. My mother had hidden it to prevent the Obsidian Society from using it as a weapon. Elias explained that the society had been searching for the core for centuries. "Your mother stole the Codex from them," he said. "She knew they would use it to dominate the world." The weight of her sacrifice hit me hard. She had given up everything to protect this secret. Now, it was my turn to carry the burden. One evening, as Elias and I worked on the Codex, a loud crash came from the inn's front door. We rushed downstairs to find a package wrapped in black cloth. Inside was a note and a single obsidian stone. The note read, "Return the Codex or suffer the consequences." The stone was cold to the touch, and its surface seemed to shimmer unnaturally. Elias's face turned grim. "They're here," he said. "We need to leave. Now." We packed our things and fled into the night, the weight of the Codex heavy in my bag. The society was closer than I had thought, and they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Elias led me to a remote village high in the mountains, where the locals were wary of outsiders. They spoke in hushed tones about the keepers of the old ways, a group of elders who guarded ancient knowledge. Elias seemed to know them well, and they welcomed us with cautious hospitality. The elders examined the Codex, their eyes widening as they flipped through its pages. "This is the lost Codex of Erythra," one of them said. "It holds the key to the Eternum Core. But beware, those who seek its power are cursed." Their words sent a chill through me. Was I walking into a curse by pursuing my mother's legacy? The elders told us that the Codex was only the beginning. To unlock its full potential, I would need to complete a series of trials, each designed to test my worthiness. The first trial was a test of courage, a journey through the Cave of Shadows, a labyrinth filled with traps and illusions. Elias insisted on accompanying me, but the elders forbade it. This is her journey, they said. She must face it alone. With a deep breath, I entered the cave, the codex tucked safely in my bag. The air was cold, and the walls seemed to close in around me. As I ventured deeper, I heard whispers, voices that sounded like my mother's. "Turn back," they said. "You're not ready." But I pressed on, determined to prove myself. In the heart of the cave, I found a chamber illuminated by a single beam of light. In the center was a pedestal holding a mirror. As I approached, the mirror's surface rippled, and I saw a vision of my mother. She looked younger, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. "You've come far," she said, "but the hardest part is yet to come. The society will stop at nothing to get the codex. You must be stronger than they are." The vision faded, leaving me alone in the chamber. On the pedestal was a small, glowing crystal, the key to the next trial. I picked it up, feeling a surge of energy. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. "You are my legacy. Don't let them win." The elders were impressed when I emerged from the cave of shadows with the crystal. They explained that the second trial would test my wisdom. I was to solve a riddle hidden within the codex, one that would reveal the location of the next clue. The riddle read, "Where the sun meets the sea and the stars touch the earth, lies the key to eternity." Elias and I pored over maps and ancient texts, trying to decipher the riddle. Finally, we realized it pointed to a coastal temple in Greece, where the alignment of the sun and stars created a unique phenomenon during the summer solstice. The society would likely be watching, so we had to move quickly. The temple was a crumbling ruin perched on a cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. As we approached, I noticed strange symbols carved into the stone, similar to those in the codex. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of salt and incense. In the center of the temple was a large sundial, its shadow pointing to a hidden compartment in the floor. Inside the compartment was a scroll wrapped in silk. It contained another riddle, along with a warning. The path to the Eternum Core is paved with sacrifice. Only the pure of heart may proceed. Elias looked uneasy. "The society will be here soon," he said. "We need to leave before they find us." As we left the temple, we heard the sound of engines in the distance. A black SUV was speeding toward us, kicking up dust on the narrow road. Elias grabbed my hand and pulled me into the forest. "We can't let them catch us," he said. "If they get the codex, everything your mother fought for will be lost." We ran through the trees, the sound of footsteps and shouts close behind. My heart pounded as I clutched the codex to my chest. Just as I thought we were safe, a figure stepped out of the shadows, a man in a black suit, his eyes cold and calculating. "Give me the codex," he demanded. Elias stepped in front of me, shielding me from the man. "You'll have to go through me first," he said. The man lunged at Elias, and the two of them grappled in the dirt. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Elias managed to knock the man down, but more figures emerged from the trees. "Run!" Elias shouted. "I'll hold them off." I hesitated, but Elias's fierce expression left no room for argument. I turned and ran, tears streaming down my face. Behind me, I heard the sound of a struggle, followed by a gunshot. My heart sank. Elias had sacrificed himself to protect me and the codex. I couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. I made it to a nearby village, where I found refuge with a kind old woman. She tended to my wounds and listened as I told her about Elias and the codex. "You've been through much," she said, "but your journey is far from over." She pointed to the scroll I had found in the temple. "The third trial is a test of the heart. You must face your deepest fear." That night, I dreamed of my mother. She stood in a field of stars, holding the Eternum Core in her hands. "You're stronger than you think," she said, "but you must confront the darkness within yourself." When I woke, I knew what I had to do. The third trial would take me to a place I had avoided for years, my childhood home, where my mother's secrets had begun. My childhood home stood at the edge of a quiet town, its once vibrant garden now overgrown with weeds. The house had been empty since my mother's death, and stepping inside felt like walking into a memory. The air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of her perfume. I could almost hear her laughter echoing through the halls. I made my way to her study, where she had spent countless hours working on mysterious projects. The room was exactly as she had left it. Books piled high, papers scattered across the desk, and a large map pinned to the wall. In the corner was a safe I had never noticed before. The combination? My birthday. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with her thoughts and sketches. This was where the third trial would begin. The journal detailed my mother's early years with the Obsidian Society. She had joined willingly, drawn by their promises of knowledge and power. But as she rose through their ranks, she discovered their true intentions: to use the Eternum Core to control the world. I couldn't let them win, she wrote. I had to protect the core, even if it meant betraying everything I knew. One entry stood out. The third trial is not just a test of heart. It's a reckoning. To move forward, you must confront the pain of the past. I realized the trial wasn't about facing a physical challenge. It was about facing myself, my fears, my regrets, and the unresolved grief over my mother's death. In the journal, my mother mentioned a mirror of truth hidden in the house. According to her notes, it would show me what I needed to see. I searched the attic and finally found it. A tall, ornate mirror covered by a dusty cloth. When I uncovered it, my reflection stared back at me, but something was off. The reflection began to change, showing scenes from my past. I saw myself as a child, watching my mother leave for long trips, never explaining where she was going. I saw the arguments we had as I grew older, and my frustration with her secrecy. And I saw the day she died, the guilt I had carried for not being there. The mirror forced me to confront these memories, forcing me to acknowledge the pain I had buried. As I stood before the mirror, tears streamed down my face. The reflection shifted again, showing my mother smiling at me. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You've carried this burden for too long. It's time to let go." Her words were like a balm to my soul. For the first time since her death, I felt a sense of peace. The mirror's surface rippled, and a small compartment opened at its base. Inside was a key and a note. "The next step lies where it all began." I knew exactly where to go, the attic where I had first discovered the chest. The third trial had taught me that healing was the first step towards strength. I was ready to continue the journey. Back in the attic, I used the key to open a hidden compartment in the chest. Inside was a strange device, a small, metallic orb covered in intricate engravings. It hummed with energy when I touched it, and I felt a connection to it, as if it recognized me. The Codex referred to it as the Seeker, a tool that would guide me to the Eternum Core. The fourth trial, according to the Codex, was a test of resolve. I would need to follow the Seeker's guidance, no matter how dangerous the path. As I held the orb, it emitted a soft glow, pointing toward a location on the map, a remote mountain range in South America. The journey would be perilous, but I had come too far to turn back now. The Seeker's glow intensified as I packed my bags for South America. The mountain range it pointed to was deep in the Andes, a place so remote that even modern maps had little detail. Elias's absence weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. My mother's legacy and the fate of the Eternum Core depended on it. Before leaving, I visited the old woman in the village who had helped me after Elias's sacrifice. She handed me a small pouch filled with herbs. "For protection," she said. "The mountains are unforgiving, and not all dangers are human." Her words stayed with me as I boarded the plane, the Seeker pulsing softly in my back. The journey to the Andes was grueling. After days of travel, I reached a small village at the base of the mountains. The villagers were wary of outsiders, but when they saw the Seeker, their demeanor changed. An elderly man approached me, his eyes wide with recognition. "You carry the Seeker," he said. "You seek the Eternum Core." He explained that his people were descendants of the ancient guardians who had protected the core for centuries. "The path is treacherous," he warned. "Many have tried to reach the core, but few have returned. The mountain tests not only the body, but the soul." He offered to guide me part of the way, but the final leg of the journey would be mine alone. The climb was brutal. The air grew thinner with every step, and the terrain was steep and unforgiving. My guide, An elderly man named Matteo moved with surprising agility, his knowledge of the mountain evident in every step. As we ascended, he told me stories of the core, how it was said to hold the power of creation itself, but also the potential for destruction. After 2 days of climbing, we reached a plateau where the seeker's glow became almost blinding. "This is as far as I can go," Matteo said. "From here, you must follow the seeker's light. But beware, the mountain has a way of revealing your deepest fears." He handed me a small talisman. "For courage," he said before turning back. The seeker led me to a narrow cave entrance hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, the walls were covered in glowing crystals, casting an eerie light. As I ventured deeper, I began to hear voices, whispers that sounded like my own. They echoed my doubts and fears. "You're not strong enough. You'll fail just like your mother." I pressed on, clutching the talisman Matteo had given me. The voices grew louder, more insistent, but I refused to let them break me. Finally, I reached a chamber where the seeker's light converged on a pedestal. On it was a small, intricately carved box. Inside was another piece of the puzzle, a crystal shard that pulsed with the same energy as the seeker. As I touched the crystal shard, a vision overwhelmed me. I saw the Eternum Core, a massive, glowing sphere suspended in a cavern of light. It radiated power, but also a sense of balance, as if it held the very essence of life. My mother appeared in the vision, standing beside the core. "You're close," she said, "but the final trial will be the hardest. You must prove that you are worthy of the core's power." The vision faded, leaving me breathless. The seeker's light now pointed deeper into the cave, toward a passage I hadn't noticed before. The final trial awaited, and I knew it would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The passage led to a massive cavern, its walls shimmering with veins of gold and crystal. In the center was a stone archway, covered in ancient symbols that matched those in the codex. Beyond it, I could see a faint glow, the Eternum Core. But between me and the archway was a series of challenges, each more daunting than the last. The first challenge was a bridge made of light, suspended over a bottomless chasm. The seeker pulsed in my hand, as if urging me forward. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge, my heart pounding with every step. The bridge swayed dangerously, but I focused on the core's glow, letting it guide me. When I reached the other side, I felt a surge of confidence. I was closer than ever. The second challenge was a massive stone guardian, its eyes glowing with the same light as the core. It spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "To pass, you must prove your worth. What do you seek, and why?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on finding the core that I hadn't fully considered why I wanted it. I thought of my mother, her sacrifices, and the danger the core posed in the wrong hands. "I seek the core to protect it," I said, "to honor my mother's legacy and ensure it's never used for harm." The guardian studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. "You may pass," it said, "but the final test will not be so easily overcome." The final challenge was a mirror, much like the one in my childhood home. But this one was different. It showed not the past, but the future. I saw two paths. One where I used the core's power to heal the world, and another where I succumbed to its temptation, becoming a tyrant. The mirror's voice echoed in my mind. "Which path will you choose?" I hesitated, the weight of the decision crushing me. The core's power was immense, but so was its potential for destruction. Finally, I spoke. "I choose neither. The core's power is too great for any one person to wield. It must be protected, not used." The mirror's surface rippled, and the path to the core opened. I had passed the final trial. The cavern was breathtaking. The core floated in the center, its light casting rainbows across the walls. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the responsibility I now carried. As I approached, I felt its energy, a hum that resonated deep within me. My mother's voice echoed in the cavern. "You've done it. You've proven yourself worthy." But before I could reach the core, a voice interrupted the silence. "I knew you'd lead me here." I turned to see a man in a black suit, the same man who had confronted Elias. He He was flanked by others, all members of the Obsidian Society. They had followed me, and now they were here to claim the core. The man stepped forward, his cold eyes fixed on the core. "You've done well," he said, "but this is where your journey ends. The core belongs to the society." I stood between them and the core, my mind racing. I had no weapons, no way to fight them, but I couldn't let them win. As they advanced, the core's light intensified, filling the cavern with a blinding glow. The ground shook, and the walls began to collapse. The society members hesitated, their confidence wavering. I realized the core was reacting to their presence. It was defending itself. I had to act quickly. I reached out to the core, feeling its energy surge through me. At that moment, I understood what I had to do. As I touched the Eternum core, its energy surged through me, filling my mind with visions of the past, present, and future. I saw the Obsidian Society's rise to power, their greed, and corruption twisting the core's potential for good into a tool of domination. I also saw my mother's sacrifice and her determination to protect the core at all costs. Finally, I saw myself standing at a crossroads with the power to decide the core's fate. The core's voice echoed in my mind, calm and ancient. "You have proven yourself worthy. What is your choice?" I knew what I had to do. The core's power was too great for anyone to wield, even me. It needed to be hidden, protected, and kept out of the hands of those who would abuse it. The society members were closing in, their leader sneering as he reached for the core. "You can't stop us," he said, but I had already made my decision. I focused all my willpower on the core, channeling its energy into a single, blinding burst of light. The cavern shook violently, and the walls began to collapse. The society members screamed as the light overwhelmed them, forcing them to retreat. I held the core tightly, feeling its power wane as I sealed it away. The cavern's entrance collapsed, trapping me inside. I knew I might not make it out alive, but I had fulfilled my mother's legacy. The core was safe. As the dust settled, I heard voices calling my name. Through the rubble, I saw Matteo and a group of villagers digging their way into the cavern. They had followed me, determined to help. Matteo's eyes widened when he saw the sealed core. "You did it," he said. "You protected the core." With their help, I made it out of the cavern, bruised and exhausted but alive. The society members were gone, their plans thwarted. The core was hidden, its location known only to me and the villagers who had sworn to protect it. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. I returned to my childhood home, the weight of my journey finally lifting. The house no longer felt like a place of secrets and sorrow. It was a reminder of my mother's courage and the legacy she had left behind. I placed the Seeker and the Codex in the attic, alongside the chest and the journal. They were safe now, just like the core. The villagers in the Andes had promised to guard the core's location, passing down the responsibility through generations. The Obsidian Society had been dealt a blow, but I knew they would never stop searching. Still, I was ready. I had faced my fears, honored my mother's sacrifice, and found my strength. Years later, I stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, the wind tugging at my hair. Beside me was a young girl, my daughter, her eyes wide with curiosity as I told her the story of the Eternum core. "Your grandmother was a hero," I said, "and one day, if the time comes, you might have to protect the core too." She nodded solemnly, clutching the talisman Matteo had given me all those years ago. The legacy of the core was no longer a burden. It was a promise to protect the world from those who would abuse its power, and to honor the sacrifices of those who had come before. As the sun set, casting golden light over the waves, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. My mother's wealth had never been money. It was the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. And that was a legacy worth passing on. The Eternum core remained hidden, its power dormant but protected. The Obsidian Society continued to search for it, but without the Codex or the Seeker, their efforts were in vain. I dedicated my life to preserving my mother's legacy, sharing her story with those who would listen. My daughter grew up strong and brave, her heart filled with the same sense of purpose that had guided me. She would never have to face the trials I had endured, but she understood the importance of the Corps' protection. The circle was complete, a legacy of courage, sacrifice, and hope. And so, the story of the Eternum Corps became a legend, whispered by those who knew the truth. A reminder that true wealth lies not in power or riches, but in the strength to protect what matters most.